Hello everyone who likes to turn up the volume on the radio and make it go diff, diff, diff. I am BorderWise and welcome to another From the Depths tutorial, and this one might actually save your life. Actually, that's a lie. It might save the life of your ship. Because today we're covering a very specific kind of CIWS that I should have covered ages ago, but we're covering it now. It's DIF CIWS. So, quick shout out to Gmodism. It is because of his channel that I even know what this is, and I'm going to be leaving a link to his video made on DIF CIWS, made over 2 years ago. My, how time flies. So, first off, we need to establish, what the hell both DIF and CIWS is. For anyone who doesn't know, DIF just stands for Direct Input Feed, and is any APS or Advanced Cannon system that does not have loaders or clips at all, and it just has the ammo intakes mounted directly onto the firing piece, so no loaders or clips used at all. CIWS is just pretty much any weapon that is controlled using a CIWS controller. So this, or this, the regular and the all-in-one. It's more accurately an anti-munition system or an anti-munition weapon, because, in real life, CIWS is used to destroy incoming projectiles and also incoming small soft targets. And from the depths, a CIWS is pretty much something that shoots down enemy projectiles, and that's basically it. So that is APS, lasers, plasma gun, crams, and some simple weapons, unfortunately not pack or flamethrowers. So, DIF CIWS is those things put together. Generally, a CIWS gun in From the Depths looks something like this prefab right here. It is an advanced cannon because generally advanced cannons make the best CIWS weapons, although lasers and plasma guns are, pretty good. Crams are very niche, and, simple weapons you can do it. Generally APS is what you use, and it looks something like this. It's some kind of small gauge thing with a fast rate of fire, preferably a continuous rate of fire as well, though belt feeders are absolutely acceptable. But yeah, generally lots of loaders, lots of clips. So why would you ever want to use a direct input feed gun as a CIWS? You will notice that this one we have here fires 0.3 rounds per minute. So takes about 3 minutes to fire one shot, basically. Or at least that's the standard rate of fire set by the intakes. Well, as is rather infamous, or famous, I guess, with CIWS guns From the Depths, there is a kind of exploit with them. The maximum length of shell in From the Depths that you can stick into a loader is about 8 meters. You can't get any longer shells than that, which means for shells like what is loaded into our friend here, this thing is, if it was to actually be loaded into this gun we have here, you would need loaders which are 10 meters long, and that's impossible. They only go up to 8. However, if the input is directly on the firing piece, you can load monster, ridiculous shells like this. And where this becomes handy for CIWS is certain projectiles, cram shells and missiles in particular, have a lot of health, and there's a point where regular CIWS using loaders and, even if you use more fancy stuff like lasers or plasma, or even crams, they just don't do enough damage fast enough to stop these projectiles. So, if I load in something like a huge missile, for instance, so where are we? Huge missile, huge launcher, so there are things in the game which are literally this long, and you can see here that it has over 200,000 health. That is not something that can be easily taken care of with a regular CIWS, so if you jam a 10-meter shell into this little deck gun here, and in particular if you load it with anti-munition bodies like we have here, you have a thing that per shot does almost 30,000 anti-munition damage, except anti-munition damage and kinetic damage with APS shells has a ×5 modifier. At least I think that was what it is. It might have been changed at some point. ×5 modifier to damaging projectiles. So this actually does close to 150,000 damage to things like this large missile we just slapped down here. So 2 of these shells could actually destroy something like this. So we can actually demonstrate that right now by dropping 2 of these down like so. Now, while we're placing this, I should mention that this is something that this is quite a finicky type of thing to do, but it is really worth it. But we'll get into that. Let's spawn in something with huge missiles. Spawn the javelin, which I believe my buddy Blarent made back in the day. It was quite good. So wait for it and toggle that off. And takes care of those 2 cram shells. Refill APS, just to be sure. That was a little bit unrealistic what I just did. And wait for it, we've got 1 huge missile coming in. That didn't quite do it, but it did over 100,000. Hold on, let's see here. Maybe if we do 4 of them, this will be easier. I'm also going to blow up. Also gonna blow up the cram cannon on this so it doesn't stuff with our results. Hold on. This is the kind of thing you should set up ahead of time, actually. There we go. So now that we have this, and if we load in this, we have 1 huge missile coming in, actually 2. Kablooey! So over 200,000, nope. So over 200,000 flak damage just from like 4 tiny little guns. So that is very powerful. That size of missile would be very, very difficult to shoot down with regular CIWS or with a butt ton of interceptors, which is the other alternative to this kind of defense. Now, so this is usually best combined with other kinds of CIWS, like the regular kind, because goodness knows this is not something you want to use for every kind of anti-munition purpose, and there are a few tricks to them. Firstly is the setup for the CIWS controller itself, and the shell itself, by the way, this is the kind of shell you would probably use. You could try making kinetic DIF CIWS, but honestly, you're better off just making a regular CIWS gun with like a lot of loaders and stuff if you're going to do that. Because, like, it is a bit wasteful and to just make a massive kinetic CIWS shell. And you'd also need a very long barrel. With flak, it doesn't need to be so accurate. You can get away with this kind of stubby barrel, which makes the whole turret more compact and more useful. So here, I'm going to just show off the CIWS controller itself. That's just kind of bundled in there. So, the main rule set looks something like this. There's a lot of, there's stuff to consider. Firstly, you don't want it shooting at anything that's too far away. You do really do not want this particular kind of weapon to miss. That's bad. So about 700 meters, maybe even a little bit less, is actually pretty good. Because your other CIWS, if it's longer range, you can just swat smaller projectiles, which are less of a problem. And also it means that if something misses you, you're not wasting shells on it. And also altitude, these are not super cavitation CIWS, and generally, like, you can shoot at torpedoes with this. Goodness knows the Stronghold has massive torpedoes, which you might want to DIF CIWS. But generally, it's for things like really monstrously big Doomcram shells or huge missiles. And distance, I always like to set this to really prioritize stuff that gets close, because that's a problem. And projectile diameter, you don't want to go nuts with this one, because there's ways to fool this. Just because a projectile is big doesn't automatically mean it's really dangerous. Huge missiles are kind of slow, they can miss, and if a underpacked 2,000mm cram is coming at you, but a max-packed 1,950mm cram is coming at you, you probably don't want to automatically always go for the higher shell. We're gonna go over this in a second when we talk about counters to DIF CIWS. Type of projectile, you do want to kind of save this for cram cannons, simply because, really big cram shells, we're talking the kind that has like hundreds of thousands of points of health, are actually a little bit harder to deal with than huge missiles, because huge missiles are kind of slow, and if you've got a nice interceptor turret, so if you've got something like my current default counter turret, so where is it? It's here. I am very fond of using these things. It's even decorated. It's just a bunch of missile interceptors on a 2-axis turret. If you have these scattered around all over your craft, they actually put a serious dent in large and huge missiles, like from quite a considerable range, like from over 1,000 meters away, which means that you, like, if you combine that with DIF CIWS, the DIF CIWS is really for cram cannons, which can kind of sneak in and only be detected at a few hundred meters. You also want to prioritize cluster size, because these are flak shells. They really do, they can wipe out an entire cram volley if they hit in the right spot, so you do kind of want them to prefer to go for like clusters of shells or missiles. And you do want them, and this is something I only figured out recently, thanks to going back and looking at Gbodism's original DIF CIWS tutorial. I didn't know this was a thing in CIWS. You want them to prioritize, each individual CIWS controller, you want them to prioritize a shell that another CIWS is not aiming at, because these controllers actually talk to each other. They calculate, they can calculate whether something is being aimed at enough. So you really want each little diff gun aiming at something different, because otherwise they might waste their damage. So yeah, that is the basic gist of it. And one thing you also really need to do is preferably set up more than one diff system per little turret. And by the way, you pretty much don't want this fixed. That is bad. And also, if you're going to go a full 500mm, you want to rely less on a mantlet and more on the 2-axis turret itself, because you'll see, if I actually control this, that this little 2-axis turret actually aims quite quickly. But if this was on a mantlet, so like so, max gauge guns, APS guns, the barrel traverses quite slowly, so better 2-axis turret than a mantlet for these guys, because you do want them to switch around quite fast. Alright, so now I'm going to load in my second, better one, which was actually the first one I made. Then I realized we needed a kind of an intermediary here. So this is something that I would actually use on my craft. It even has a little bit of deco. These are synchronized properly. And also probably a good thing to have on your CIWS controller is kind of an angle of fire. And each little DIF CIWS setup kind of should have its own little area of your craft to defend. You don't want them overlapping too much. In a hot second, we're going to be talking about good and bad DIF CIWS setup. But over here, you'll see ID number 3. It is not set up correctly, interestingly enough. Actually, hold on. No, it is. So, let's see here. ID 1. Weapon 2 is set up to fire after ID 1 over there. ID 2, and then ID 3, like so. And then over here. Set up to fire after ID 4, and set up after ID 5. This is not perfect. I'm fiddled around with the exact settings here for ages, and I still haven't found the correct one, so there's no getting around it. If you really want to get the most out of these things, you kind of need to test them a lot, because where you put them, and how fast your craft moves, and what angle stuff comes in at your craft, that all affects it. But it's all ultimately worth it for things like this. Because the opening volley, you do need to survive that. Especially for cram cannons, that is the volley that's most likely to miss. But it's also the one that's most likely to, like, cause you to lose the fight if it does hit you. So it's a bit of a problem. So kablooey, we've got this coming in. Splat, and splat. There's that whole Eerie volley, and the Eerie actually has some pretty, not quite doom crams, but still some pretty nasty crammage. And we don't like that, and this is where... Ta-da! Beautiful. So that's like an opening volley of crams, successfully dealt with. And this is where things get a little bit upsetting. So this particular setup isn't quite good enough. to continuously deal with that. You'd want to have more of them. You'd want to have them spread out a bit more and have them all doing their own thing, so to speak. There, you could just see it was wasted a little bit. Hard to get around that. Now, in case you run into stuff that uses these things, because there are a few just on the workshop, that was a horrible cram volley to let slip through. There are ways to counter this. And to go over that, we firstly need to spawn in a craft of mine, which we're all very fond of, I think, because this is something I kept in mind when building it. So let's go here, let's spawn in our good friend, the Drakenslong, and we can go over, firstly, how the CIWS setup here is actually kind of bad. These are the old DIF CIWS guns when I was still first learning to use them. Don't do this. So, these things, you'll notice they are using mantlets, and give us a hot second for the friggin' thing, the blocks to actually disappear. They're using mantlets, and they're all clustered together. This is bad. Don't do this. This effectively means, like, admittedly this thing is a right-sider, so they are all on the right side, literally right side in both senses of the word, but really, what you want is to spread them out, and each little CIWS has their own little area of the ship to focus on, especially if you're building big craft like this, because then they spit out and pop things, and they don't waste their shots like all shooting at the same target. That's quite important. And hopping over to something that actually does have good DIF CIWS setup, where is it? I put it somewhere over here. You know it. It's the Gimli. Gimli is just a really good practice target for a bunch of stuff, simply because it is like big and chunky. It takes a lot of hits, and yeah, its DIF CIWS is actually like set up in a pretty good way. Gmodism spent a lot of time on this. He's still getting mileage out of it to this day. Please don't crash my game, I hate that. Alright, so you will see here that here and there's DIF CIWS set up all over the place. So, what is this? I believe, is this what I think it is? This is set up to, nope, that is an armor-piercing shell. This is what we're looking at. What funky fleet colors I have. This is one of his DIF CIWS guns. It's set up over here. And, let's see here. Synchronization, nope. Nope, but it is set up like so. So there's one over here, and then there is another one over here. Where is it? Over here, here's some more. Little 500mm CIWS guns. Here's one, here's some more. There. 456mm. Varied the size a little bit. Here's another one, all spread out, and all of them are really set up to focus down on like a specific area of the ship. And over here as well, very neat and tidy, and not all clustered together in the same place, which is the thing, because you don't actually want to do that with any kind of defense. I did that with the Drakenslung because I was a dummy, and the DIF CIWS was kind of an afterthought. Now, how do you counter DIF CIWS if you see it? Because I would be remiss if I failed to mention that. So, firstly, let's go load in something that I know has been... where is it? Where's it? Prototypes, cram... for missiles, the trick is just to spam more of them and stagger their fire. And honestly, I'd recommend against using huge missiles in general, unless you're sure they're going to hit. Let's try this. I think this does the trick. This is a spoiler for something I'm going to be making later, but hopefully it'll just be fine. This is just a thing I made. And one of the simplest things you can do is just have, well, a bigger cram cannon, but also, just have staggered fire. This shell has over 400,000 health, so it's not exactly easy to destroy in the first place, but it fires this monstrously big pure kinetic shell first, and then it fires a whopping big frag shell to bring the party happen. To bring the party happen? Blurg. Alright, so if we spawn the Gimli facing like so, Hopefully this shows it off. Well, it'll show off both DIF CIWS, how they're supposed to work, and one way you can get around them. So, spawn in this, spawn in Twin Guard, whoopsie daisy. Whoopsie daisy, there we go. Waiting for the thing to load. Waiting for the thing to load. The thing is very big. Boop doop. There we go. There we go, there we go. Have I remembered? Oh, goodness. Oh, the Gimle's a big girl. Oh, she's big. Whoops. And I also spawned her partially underwater. That wasn't very nice. So there you can see right there, this massive diff rod going straight for this here shell. Also, other things as well. You can see the missile interceptors going off, which... that has no fins on it. Interesting. But anyway, it doesn't need fins, what I'm talking about. So, that goes off, flattens that. That shell has too much health, and it's just gone splooey. And that allows the second shell to sneak in and actually almost disable that turret. My goodness. But then it is went... wait a minute. I might have spawned this in too close. Gimli's big crams, firing some more. Whole bunch of DIF CIWS going off. Wait a minute. And the staggered fire has been messed up, so that's annoying. But you get the picture. Just don't cluster your crams, which is, it's also a reason to have more than one. If you wanted to make, and it's not a bad thing to make one gigantic cram cannon, but, well, that cram cannon got shot down. This one fires. And it manages to get through and scratch the paint a little bit. So that's DIF CIWS in a nutshell. Very good, very powerful. You, honestly, most of the time you don't really need it. If you're playing the campaign, you're playing adventure mode, it can potentially save your bacon. But really, it's more... I would say it's more of a tournament thing that you need to worry about. Simply because in a tournament, you're more likely to face fancy, exotic things like this. Perhaps not this big, but yeah. And, by the way, for those who keep talking about cram CIWS, which I've yet to actually cover on the channel at all... Wow, when hollow points hit, they're fun. That's more of a tournament-specific thing, I feel. Like, DIF CIWS just does the same thing, but better in every single way. And now we've got, actually, the sync really horrible, and now it's the hollow point hitting every time. So yeah, hopefully that is helpful. If you, found this video helpful, well, good. And if you found it interesting, also good. Wow, that is a weird heading for the outro. Please let this hit. I'll be really upset if it doesn't. Okay, so, thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Support me on Patreon, and YouTube membership if you like, it really helps. And there's fun perks in it for you, like a Patreon exclusive Discord. Available at the starting pledge of $1 a month, you get to hang out with me on the internet. Isn't that nice? Thank you to all my current supporters, and I will see you next time in From the Depths. Check out my other channels and my Twitch as well, please. Farewell!